Good morning, everybody. Somebody asked me if I would introduce some of the folks here. So since I know everybody's name, I will introduce. We have Donna Hastings here, who's here for the first time. Did I have to say your last name right? And Matthew, her son. And this is Donna Swartz. Do we have anybody else named Donna? Okay, who else named Donna? So below Donna Hastings, this is Doug here, Doug. Dr. Stephen Souls back there in the back. This is JC and his wife, Brandy. And on the other side of Donna, you have Janetta, which you all know Janetta Everhart. This is Glenda, Billy, Carolyn. There's Dr. Nathan back there, and Wendy. I didn't mean to leave you last
Don't
week.
mean Donna get a doctor.
That's what I was going to say.
We're
Did you
doctors.
forget I was a doctor?
Don't we can't.
Catch up.
This is
Excuse
Dr.
us.
Donna and Dr. Janetta.
Better.
Dr. King.
Yes.
We worked hard for them doctors.
I know you did. I know you did.
That's hard.
It was.
I know. I'm surrounded by doctors.
And
Too
you
bad none of us
created-
can help you if you get sick.
You created them all.
Anyway, welcome to our international audience also. That's the joy of the Lord. We have fun here. We had communion last night, and we didn't see the full moon when we left here last night. Did you see the full moon last night, sometime after midnight? I woke up with it. I saw the light coming through the window. I said, "What is that?" And the moon was that beautiful Passover moon. That's the moon that Jesus Christ saw when he walked out of the Passover supper that night. He looked up, saw that beautiful full moon. We saw the same full moon last night, or maybe early this morning. Today is actually, believe it or not, the 14th of the month of Abib. Now, the name Abib is a Hebrew word. It means green ears. When things are green, see the trees are green outside? So Abib is the name of the first month of God's biblical calendar. And it begins when you see the new moon, which on April the 6th, they saw the new moon in Jerusalem. You count 14 days. Today's the 14th day. Why is that significant? Because on the 14th day, they slew the Passover lamb. They sacrificed the Passover lamb. They did it in the afternoon of the 14th. And Jesus is called in 1 Corinthians 5:7 our Passover. He is our Passover, our lamb. And so today is the actual day, the 1988th anniversary of the crucifixion of Christ. And he died at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon on this day. Let's ask God's blessing. Would one of you like to ask God's blessing on our service today? JC, go right ahead, sir.
Heavenly Father, we thank you again for bringing us all together. We ask you that you allow us to hear your word, that we may become your word, and that your word may dwell within us. We appreciate you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. I brought a calendar with me today. You probably have one at the house similar to this. Right here, today's the 20th, and right there it says, you can't read it, but it says Passover. I'll leave it up here, you can see it. It says Passover. Today actually is the Passover. Now, on the next day, it says Easter. However, Easter is not the day that commemorates the resurrection of Jesus. The name Easter, you know what that is. We've talked about that. But I'll tell you what it is. Tomorrow is the first day of the Passover feast, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And it's also another important event because the Sunday during Passover week is the wave sheaf. I was listening to Perry Stone here yesterday. I record his programs. He's pretty interesting sometimes. But he is so messed up on God's festivals. He said there are 3 feast days in the spring. He said Passover is one, the Feast of Unleavened Bread is your second one, and then First Fruits is your third, and then after that comes Pentecost. I thought, what? Don't listen to him. You're going to get so confused if you listen to him. Passover is not the 14th. It's the day when the Passover was killed. But the Passover day is the preparation for the feast of the Passover, as John 13:1 calls it. The feast of the Passover. And then you have 2 feast days during Passover week. And then what he calls first fruits is the wave sheaf. It's not a feast day. It's a work day. In other words, on that Sunday, they went out to their fields and worked just like any other day. It is not a feast day. But Perry Stone doesn't know that. And I'm not picking on him. I'm just saying that there are certain ones that get on TV and try to teach you these things, but they haven't kept them. This is my 40-something, 46 to, I don't know, maybe 47th year that I've been observing these holy days. I think I know a little more about it than Perry Stone, who's only read an article about it and then wanted to get on TV and teaches people about it. But anyway, tomorrow we're going to have a service at the Lakes Event Center. It's also where they have weddings down there, and that's the main thing I'm aware of. I call it the Wedding Chapel, but it's called the Lakes Event Center. It's on Hilton Lake Road, and did all of you get a text message or an email with the address? You can put it
4577 Hilton Lake Road.
4577 Hilton Lake Road.
Kannapolis.
Yeah, it's in Kannapolis now. And it's easy to find. It's 2 miles off the interstate. You take Lane Street, go to the stop sign, turn right, go about a mile and a half, turn right on Camp Joe. You go 1 block, turn left, that's Hilton Lake Road. That's how simple it is, real simple. I wish we could have been there today, in fact, because it's right below my house. All right. Just a few more announcements, then I'm going to get into a very encouraging message today. In fact, I'm going to give you something today that I myself have never heard anybody ever explain or ever preach. And I've never preached it. In fact, I'm not too sure I understood it until recently. And it's about the fact that we have unsaved loved ones that we can protect from the Great Tribulation. And I want to get into that in just a few moments. How successful have you been in your de-leavening, as I call it, getting the leavening out of your house? Man, I've worked and worked and worked till I've worked myself to exhaustion. Because when I was living at home as a teenager, all I had to do was clean my room. Now I've got 2 houses to clean and a car. And so I wanted to get all the leavening out of the refrigerator and all the kitchen. That was a lot. And there are certain rooms I just don't eat any bread in all year long, so I don't have to worry about those rooms. So I know they're good, but boy, I tell you what, it was a lot of work. And I wonder, how am I going to do this when I'm 90 years old? You know, I'll have to hire somebody to come in there and de-leaven for me. But I'm going to talk to you tomorrow about why God said put the leavening out of your house. There's a very important spiritual reason why we should do the physical de-leavening, get the leavening out of our house for 7 days. And you'll understand the Feast of Passover a lot better if you're actually doing what God told you to do. Billy asked me to read some scriptures to you. In fact, I am pretty low-key on this, but he's not the first one to mention this to me. I want to read to you what in Deuteronomy 16, we'll start there. And starting in verse 15, it says, 7 days shall you keep a solemn feast to the Lord your God in the place which God shall choose, because the Lord your God shall bless you in all your increase and the work of your hands. So you're to rejoice. Now, verse 16 says, 3 times in the year shall all your males, and by the way, when you read chapters 12 and 14, you also see he wanted the women to be there if they could. Sometimes women have little kids and they couldn't travel, or they were pregnant and couldn't travel, but the men had no excuse. So at least the men had to be there. They're to appear before the Lord your God in the place which he shall choose. And at that time it was to be Jerusalem. In the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that's Passover. Luke 22 verse 1 calls that the Passover. And in the Feast of Weeks, that's another name for Pentecost. And in the Feast of Tabernacles, it's also called the Feast of Ingathering, and that's in October. And now here's the part Billy wanted me to emphasize. And they shall not appear before the Lord empty. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing of the Lord your God, which he has given you. I almost never read that because I'm very low-key on the offering part. And I've actually, not by Billy, but by, he's not the first one to bring this up to me, I've actually been a little bit criticized because, hey, isn't that part of celebrating God's feast? Well, yeah. Well, why don't you talk about it? Well, I made a commitment to the Lord when I was ordained at age 30 that I would never ask people for money or donations, that I would depend solely on God. It'd be a ministry of faith. And whether we grow large or whether we stay small, I told God, I said, I will never beg for money, so you lay it on the hearts of your true people to support the ministry. It is true, however, and Billy brought this out. He asked me about this, because 3 times a year, Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles, we are to bring an offering before God. And churches who celebrate the holy days, every one of them that I know of, actually pass a plate during that time. I've never passed a plate in all these years. I did bring the tithe box back there, and if you'd like to give an offering as a part of your celebration of this Passover feast, I appreciate it, and it goes to keep the ministry going. In fact, it goes to keep the college open. If it wasn't for the tithes and offerings, this college would have closed years ago, because the tuition, I've been told over and over, you need to go up on your tuition.
Not me.
Who was that other lady that said that? There was recently somebody said, you gotta go up on your tuition. I forget who it was.
We haven't gone up on undergrad tuition since 2006.
I mean, it's ridiculous to.
And our rent goes up and up.
Our rent goes up and we keep the tuition the same because we depend on God's people if they're gonna, because we know God commands us to tithe. If you do that, we can keep the college open and let students come in for $800. Every year people drop out because they can't afford the $800. $100 per month for 8 months, they got it paid. And every single year people drop out because they can't make the payments. We've even had a few people to give to a scholarship fund we've had so that people who just can't afford it, hey, we can help them out. And by the way, for those of you who helped us out, thank you so much.
Yes.
God knows who you are, and we appreciate it. Yeah, we appreciate it. Yes, sir.
It does mention in there also that it's a free will offering that
Yeah.
you give, but that doesn't mean that it's a free will of your choice for whether you give or not. It just means that it's a free will
Yeah.
of what you give.
And most people assume that's over and above the regular tithe. It's a special offering. It's a love gift to God to say, God, thank you for sending your son into the world.
For what he's done for us.
Yeah, so if we really give God a gift like he deserves, we need to go borrow a few $1 billion from the bank and give it to God. I mean, how much is Jesus worth? More than we've got. And so to give, any kind of an offering shows God our appreciation. And of course, God sees it as an act of worship. When I tithe, I do it on my knees. I write the check sitting in my chair, but then I go to my prayer closet and I lay my hands on that check and I say, God, I'm worshiping you with this tithe money. I'm giving it to you. Not I'm giving it, I'm paying it. And then, of course, it's an act of worship.
And he never asks us for more than what we're able to give.
Yeah, absolutely. If you got your Bibles today, well, I'll tell you what, while we're here in Deuteronomy 16, let's start there. That's a good place to start while we're there already. In verse 1, we read here, observe the month of Abib. Now the word month is the same word elsewhere translated multiple times as new moon. How do you observe a month? Oh, look, there's a month. Did you see that month? No, but you can see the new moon. And so what they would do every month, they would go out and look for the new moon. They still do it. The Jews, the Karaite Jews in Israel still do it. And today we have something called the internet. And they put it on the internet so anyone who wants to observe the new moons will know when they come. And it says in Micah 4, the law will go forth out of Zion, which is Jerusalem. So God's calendar law, also, the new moon should be observed from Jerusalem. And it was observed April the 6th. That's how we know we've got the right day, because today's 14 days from that. So observe the new moon of Abib, count 14 days, and then you'll keep the Passover to the Lord. So I just wanted to point that out while we were here. Is there a question already?
It was a comment.
Okay.
There's a delay, so just.
Okay, well, go ahead and read it.
One of our folks with a Church of God background said at his church, they used to have special messages on holy days called offertory messages in the place of sermonettes.
Really? Okay. Didn't know that. John 19, if you have your Bibles, you may want to turn to these scriptures with me. Today is the preparation day, but I'm not going to be really talking so much about that today. I just want to sort of segue into the message I really have prepared for you today, which I think you'll find to be very encouraging, and you'll be glad you came here today as a result of it. John 19:14 says, now let me tell you something. There's a group of people who meet on Saturday. Their name is Seventh-day Adventist. I have never been one of them, but they say the word preparation means Friday. No, it doesn't. Look at verse 14. And it was the preparation of the Passover. So in other words, the Passover starts tonight at sundown, the Passover feast. Today is merely the preparation. However, today is also a day of rest, so yesterday should have been the full time of preparation for both days. But normally the 14th is a day of getting all the leavening out, which I finished that up yesterday. So the preparation doesn't mean Friday. Jesus didn't die on Friday. He died on Wednesday. And 3 days later, he was resurrected. And tonight, now here's the thing. If Christ died this year, and he died at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which he'd have to do that, do you know he would be resurrected just a few minutes after they put him into the tomb? Because they put him in the tomb at sundown, and according to the wave sheaf, if he came to fulfill the law, he would have had to have been resurrected at sundown, about the time they put him in the tomb. So God the Father worked it out so that he was crucified in a year where he could be 3 days in the tomb. Why is 3 significant? because to the Jews, 3 days meant you were legally dead. So if somebody died today at lunchtime and then he was back alive tonight, oh well, you just revived him. You gave him some good CPR. But if he's been buried for 3 days, he's legally dead. And so God worked that out where Jesus died in a year when there would be at least 3 days before the wave sheaf when he had to be resurrected. Yes, ma'am.
Does the wave sheaf have to be on the regular Sabbath?
No, it's on a Sunday during Passover, during the Passover days. But there were 2 parts to the wave sheaf. They had to harvest it at sundown, and then the next morning the high priest would wave the sheaf. So the sheaf was, that's a Hebrew word, omer, which means about 6 pints of barley. So he would, according to the records in the first century, the priestly records, the high priest would select 3 Levites to go out here and harvest that 6 pints of barley. And of course, I don't know how they figured out how much it weighed. I guess they had some way of weighing it. They'd bind it up in a sheaf, take it to the temple, and that was the first part. Well, when they harvested the wave sheaf at sundown, Jesus Christ was harvested as the first of the first fruits from the dead, because that's what the wave sheaf is. The next morning, before 9 o'clock, Mary saw him try to reach out and touch him. He said, "Don't touch me, not because you're a woman, but because I haven't gone to heaven yet." But later that afternoon, he said, "Okay, now you can touch me." Your commentaries tell you that they believe that meant that Jesus ascended to heaven sometime after the 9 o'clock, or maybe at the 9 o'clock offering. He came back the same day. He said, "Okay, now you can touch me. Go ahead. Here, touch me." But before that time, he didn't want anybody to touch him until he'd gone to heaven, to the third heaven, as the first of the first fruits of God's harvest. Now, if I call all of you a bunch of fruits, that's not a compliment. And yet the Bible says in James 1:18, we are a kind of first fruits of God's harvest. So we are the harvest. Now God planted a seed. Jesus was the seed. God had one only begotten son. He planted his only begotten son. 7 weeks later, he harvested 3,000 souls. And look how many there are today. And look how many there have been over the last nearly 2,000 years. God is bringing in a harvest to build up his family. Yes, what's that question?
It's also the sign to that generation that would prove he is the Messiah.
Yeah, the 3 days, yeah. So, because we know we're all going to be resurrected, but we don't know when, but Jesus knew exactly when. So, today is the official day of the preparation. Now, let's get into the message here. By the way, since we brought that up, how did he know he'd be 3 days in the tomb? He said, "Okay, let's see now. I've got to die on the Passover because I've got to fulfill the sacrifice. That's coming up this year on a Wednesday. The wave sheaf is going to be, I got to be resurrected by Saturday evening at sundown. So let's see, 1, 2, 3. He figured it out. It's not that the 3 days are spectacular. No matter what year he died, he had to die on the Passover and he had to be resurrected Saturday. So if the Passover fell on a Monday, he would have been resurrected Saturday evening. How many days is that? 5 days later instead of 3 days. The only reason the 3 days are significant is because that's how many days he was in the tomb between Passover and wave sheaf. Now, yes, ma'am.
Question about the wave sheaf.
Mhm.
You said there's 2 parts, and the first part was where they harvest the 6 pints of barley.
Right.
And then when did they wave the sheaf?
They brought it to the temple as soon as they harvested it, and it stayed there till 9 o'clock, till what they call the morning sacrifice, which was around 9 o'clock. And at the morning sacrifice, the high priest took that wave sheaf. He went into the temple, and he had according to Unger's Bible Dictionary, it wasn't like this. It was a horizontal tray, and he'd wave it sideways. I don't know if that means anything or not. But anyway, when you wave the wave sheaf, then God in heaven says, "Okay, now you can eat anything you want. Don't you eat any of your produce till you give me the first." You'll find that in Leviticus 23, verses 10 through 14. Don't eat any of the produce of the field until you give me the first. Kind of like your tithe. You made $100 this week. God gets the first 10th. Now you can use the 90% is left over. Another question? Okay.
Yeah, and it's all of these that we have to, y'all don't, there's about a 10-second delay between the video and live. So sometimes the comments are a little,
Go ahead.
the prophecy was also 3 days, the way Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days.
Yeah. Okay, now, I want to give you an encouraging message I've never shared with anyone. If we're in the last days and the Great Tribulation is about to fall on us, is there any way that we can protect our loved ones, even those who are not Christians? If you've heard any of my sermons at all, you've heard me say, you need to be a Philadelphian type of Christian to escape the tribulation. That's true. But all of us have family who's not saved. We have family who's not really keeping God's word. We have family that they're good people and all that, but they're not Philadelphian Christians. We have loved ones. You may have an unsaved husband or an unsaved wife or a parent or a son or daughter or a brother or sister who's certainly not a Philadelphian Christian, even if they are saved. And God does not promise protection in the tribulation to the Sardis Christians who are spiritually dead. And he doesn't promise protection to the Laodicean Christians who are spiritually lukewarm. If I'm lukewarm, I'm in trouble when the tribulation comes. Oh, I'm saved. But if, can you see me with that bright light behind me? We don't have any curtains. Just have to squint. But if I'm lukewarm when the tribulation starts, there's no promise of protection for me. And I'm a nice guy and all of that, but hey, that doesn't matter. Am I a Philadelphian? All right, let's assume I am. My brother's not. I've got aunts and uncles who aren't. I've got cousins who aren't. Is there any way that we might be able to protect them? Now, for those of you most of you here have gone to the school and you know that the scripture nowhere says that there's a pre-tribulation rapture. It's not in the Bible. Just not there. So how are we going to be protected? The 12th chapter of Revelation talks about how the remnant who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus, they're going to be in the wilderness protected for 1,260 days. God's going to protect them. Now you're going to say, where's the wilderness? I don't know. Maybe since God's church is scattered around the world, people, the true Christians in China, they have a wilderness that we don't know about. Maybe we'll be in the Appalachian Mountains for 3.5 years. Who knows where we'll be? We don't know. It takes a lot of faith, because don't ask me, because God hadn't told me. So I don't know. We're all going to have faith. So God promises to protect the Philadelphian Christians in the wilderness. But is it possible that you could take your unsaved loved ones with you? We're going to take a look at some scripture here.
It's kind of irrelevant, but what I was gonna say, you know, and having faith, if we all just kind of appear in that location, like you just don't know where, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it just happened in a blink or a twinkling of an eye.
Yeah, it's possible God could supernaturally remove you there. I mean, it wouldn't be fair for you to go because you've got good health, and here's a person that can't pay their taxi fare, so they have to stay home. So somehow, or walk, yeah. So somehow God's going to protect us. See, without faith you can't please God, and it takes a lot of faith to say, how is God going to do it? Yes, sir.
Well, you know, the Bible says that 1,000 will fall at your left hand and 10,000 will fall at your right hand, but none of it will ever come nigh you.
Yeah. And if we're a Philadelphian Christian, we've got that promise. I have emphasized the need over the years for us to be not only saved, but that Philadelphian type of Christian, which God, out of all the 7 churches, that's the only one he promises protection to. And the worst time of all of human history, which may be upon us. So let's say you are such a Christian. You've arrived at being a true Philadelphian. Now here's my question. Is there any hope for our loved ones who are not Christians, not even saved? Now, I'm going to give you some scriptures. If you're taking notes, you may want to write these down. You can look at them today. They'll make a great Bible study for you. Revelation 3. Let's start there because this talks about the Philadelphians. Revelation 3. There are 2 things you have to do to be a Philadelphian. At least 2 things. Chapter 3 and verse 8. Jesus says, I know your works, etc. And you've kept my word, which also includes God's commandments, His statutes, His judgments, and you've not denied my name. And I could give a whole sermon of what that means. It doesn't just mean to deny what His name is. His name is Jesus. But when you read Malachi, the way you deny His name is by offering up polluted sacrifices and things like that. So the way you have not denied His name is you're living for Him. I could go into that a great deal. But basically, you have not denied His authority in your life. But there are 2 things. You've kept my word. You haven't denied my name. Verse 10, because you have kept the word of my patience, I also will, here's a beautiful promise, keep you from the hour of temptation. Now, beside the word hour, If you look in the margin, my Bible says tribulation, the Great Tribulation. I promise I will protect you. Then you read the letter to the Laodiceans, no such promise. He says to the Laodiceans, I'm going to spew you out of my mouth. And to the Sardis Christians, he says, if you don't get right, I'm taking your name out of the book of life. The only church that God promises protection to is the Philadelphian type Christian. Living in the last days, verse 11, I come quickly. The church living in the last days ought to pay attention to this. Jesus says, I'm coming quickly. And so if we are in the last days, we really need to pay attention to this message today. Now, people have said they were in the last days for hundreds of years. Martin Luther probably thought he was. The difference is we have the atomic bomb and they didn't. The difference is the Jews weren't in Palestine until the 20th century. Oh, there were a few Jews, a few Arabs over there. But the Jews established a state in the middle 20th century for the first time in centuries and centuries. In 1967, they got the old city where they could rebuild the temple. There were people at that time saying, watch the Jews, they're going to build the temple. But they weren't ready. It took them decades to get ready. And I talked to a Jewish man years ago when I was in my 20s, and he said they can't do much because there's no Sanhedrin. He said they have to have a Sanhedrin. And one day we will have a Sanhedrin in Israel. Well, he told me that years ago. In 2004, a new Sanhedrin was set up. And now, for the first time since AD 70, they're talking about rebuilding that temple. Now, could Jesus come back another 100, 200, 300 years from now? Yeah, sure. But do you think they're going to wait that long to rebuild the temple? They've already got not one, but 2 cornerstones ready. And I've told you about this over and over and over, so I won't belabor it. I mean, I'm not going to belabor that because we know that you keep your eyes on Jerusalem. Folks, when they start building it, we're on a countdown to the second coming of Jesus. But before he comes back, the world's greatest tribulation in all of history is going to hit the whole world. Let's read all this verse. I will keep you from the hour of temptation, the great tribulation, which shall come upon all the world. Right here where we live. Wherever you live. All the world. To try them that dwell upon the earth. The word world in Greek means inhabited earth, if you look it up in the margin there, if you look it up in the Greek lexicon. Now, I want to give you 2 scriptures with this one. Revelation, but also Luke 21:36 gives us 2 more things we must do to escape the tribulation. He says, watch and pray. Those 2 things. Watch, which means be alert, and pray always. Be a praying always Christian, so that you may be accounted worthy. Maybe, not that you are worthy, but you may be accounted worthy if you'll do those 2 things, to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. Now, I want to go to Psalm 91. And as we get closer and closer to that time, we're not yet on a countdown. They haven't built the temple yet, but I'm keeping my eyes on Jerusalem. I went on the internet last night to see if there's any update on it. Yes?
I read last week that they accepted the red heifer.
They have?
That's what I read.
Wow.
I thought I forwarded it.
Oh, man. Yeah, no, I didn't see it last night.
I'll try to get that and confirm it.
Wow, yeah. Has anybody got you could look on your phone right now and get that email. Let's read that to people. They found a red heifer that they finally accepted?
They've accepted it, was what I read.
That's the first one, because they've been growing these red heifers year after year after year. So if they've accepted the red heifer, folks, we're almost on a countdown right now to the Great Tribulation.
Mention what the significance of that is.
Okay.
Cleanse them.
They take that, before they can offer up sacrifices at the temple, they first of all have to cleanse it from impurity. Ceremonially cleanse it, so they will sacrifice that red heifer. And a red heifer means it has no little white hairs or anything, it's a solid red. They take the ashes and they go through a ritual. They cleanse the Temple Mount, or wherever they decide for sure. There's some controversy as to where the actual temple stood. And then once they do that, it's now sanctified. They can now build the temple. So that's the first step in rebuilding the temple. Man, that's exciting. It's also a little scary. Anybody scared? This isn't religion. This is reality. This is our daily news. This is what's on the internet. This is in our newspaper. One of these days you're going to turn on the TV just to watch the news, and they're going to say, hey, something new in Israel. They're building the temple. They're going, I thought Slough was a nut. Folks. In the last days there will be a temple. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. You beginning to see this is reality? Well, when the tribulation comes, we might as well call it what we in America would call it in modern terms, World War III.
The only thing I can find right now is that this is from March. It
Uh-huh.
said that Breaking Israel News conducted an interview with Rabbi Azaria Ariel. The rabbi indicated there are 2 potential red heifers that may be candidates for sacrifice.
See, they've been doing that for a long time. She said they found one that they've accepted. So
I'll look it up.
send me, so thank you very much. That's exciting. So Revelation 3, then Luke 21, you can escape all these things. Now Psalm 91, verse 1, he that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under his shadow. Verse 3, surely he will deliver you. I'm taking this personally. From the snare of the fowler, the noisome pestilence. He'll cover you with his feathers. Jesus said, I'd be like a hen that would gather you under my wings, like a hen would gather her chicks under her wings. And that's what God's going to do. His truth will be your shield. His truth, God's truth is his word. You shall not be afraid for the terror by night. When the tribulation comes, these are encouraging scriptures. Or the arrow that flies by day. You say, there aren't any arrows. People aren't shooting arrows. You ever heard of ballistic missiles? They're flying by day. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, verse 7. 10,000 will fall down dead at your right hand, but it won't come nigh thee. Only with your eyes shall behold and see the reward of the wicked. Verse 10, no evil shall befall you, neither shall any plague come near your dwelling. Verse 14, God says, because you have set your love on me, therefore I'll deliver you. Verse 15, he shall call upon me and I'll answer him. I'll be with him in trouble. I'll deliver him and honor him. How about that? And with long life I will satisfy him. Now, what do we have to do to make sure that we are qualified ourselves, first of all? 2 Corinthians 6. I don't have my phone out here, so I don't know what time it is.
It's 11:30, and there's a question online.
11:03?
Yeah, and there's an online question.
Okay. Well, we can't take too many questions. I'll never get through this.
Okay.
We'll take it in a few minutes, though. 2 Corinthians 6, and it says this, verse 17, come out from among them, the sinners, and be separate, says the Lord. Don't touch the unclean thing. There are certain things that we shouldn't touch, even in the way of food, that we know are unclean. I'll be a father to you, and you'll be my sons and daughters, says the Lord Almighty. The next verse, having therefore these promises, dearly beloved, that God will be a father to us, let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit in your mind, perfecting holiness in the fear of God. And then in Ephesians, I know I'm going through this pretty quickly, and you probably don't have time to turn to it, but you can write it down. Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 1, be followers of God or imitators, walk in love. Verse 3, but don't do the following, fornication, uncleanness, or covetousness. Don't let it once be named among you. Verse 4, neither filthiness, foolish talking, jesting, which are not convenient. Don't do those things. Verse 5, for this you know that no whoremonger, nor unclean person, nor covetous man who is an idolater, none of these people has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no man deceive you with vain words. Oh, you don't have anything to worry about. You got saved 30, 40 years ago. You walked up to an altar. You got nothing to worry about. Why is Paul telling these born-again Christians, don't let people deceive you? Verse 7, therefore don't you be partakers with them. Why? Because whosoever does these things won't make it into God's kingdom.
God's gonna take you to heaven, he ain't gonna let you go through the tribulation.
Yeah, that's what people think, yeah.
That's right.
That's what they think. And they say don't worry about it, you won't be here, but yeah, we will. Galatians 5, but we don't have to go through the tribulation. That's what's so good about it. Galatians 5, verse 18, if you're led of the Spirit, you're not under the law, you're not going to be under the curse of the law. The works of the flesh are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, and on and on and on. Verse 21, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like, of the which I tell you before, as I've told you in time past, if you do those things, you will not inherit the kingdom. Why is he telling Christians this? Surely a Christian is going to inherit the kingdom, right? Not if he's living this way. He's a Christian, but he's not living right. Why is this important? Because I want to be living right when Jesus returns. Now, what's this got to do with your saving, helping your unsaved loved ones make it? Now I want to get into the message. That was my introduction. Okay, Joshua chapter 2. And I want to show you something here. Cell phone, so I have a clock. I'm used to having a clock also. What time is it? I hate it.
It's
For our benefit, don't worry about the time.
11:06.
Okay, yeah, good. Chapter 2 of Joshua, verse 1. Joshua sent out 2 men to spy on the promised land. He said, go view the land, even Jericho. And that was the first place. So these spies went and they came to a harlot's house, a harlot named Rahab, and they lodged there. And verse 3, the king of Jericho found out that they had gone there, and so the king sent somebody and said, bring forth the men that are come to you. And she had faith in God, and she spared those men. Now, verses 4 through 8 is beautiful, and I won't take the time to read it, but she said, we know what's happening. Well, actually, here it tells how she sent them up on the house, and she took care of them. Let's look at verse 9. I know that the Lord has given you the land, that your terror has fallen upon all of us. Verse 10, we heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea. We heard about all that and all these kings you destroyed. Verse 11, listen to the faith of Rahab, and she was a harlot. As soon as we heard these things, our hearts did melt. There remained no more courage in us. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and in earth beneath. He's the true God. The God of Israel is the real God. And up in heaven, God said, what'd you say? God heard that. Here's a Gentile who's saying your God is the true God. And in chapter 11 of Hebrews, Rahab is honored as a person of great faith. Now therefore I pray you, swear to me by the Lord, since I've shown you kindness, she spared their lives, that you'll show kindness, listen to this, to my father's house. Verse 13, that you'll save alive my father and my mother and my brethren and my sisters, and you'll deliver our lives from death. And they swore to her that they'd save her life. So she let them down by a cord. And then they said, in verse 18, when we come into the land to destroy the city of Jericho, you shall bind this line of scarlet, the scarlet thread in the window, which you did let us down by, and you shall bring, listen to this, your father, your mother, and these people were men of faith, men and women of faith, and your brethren, your brothers and sisters, and all your father's household home to you. Now, if they go out in the street to get a hamburger, verse 19, we're guiltless. We're going to kill them. Whoever's out there in the street, we're going to get them. But if they're in your house, we won't do anything. Now I'll take that question that somebody want to ask online.
Does pray mean to be living in a relationship with Christ?
Yes, to pray always in Luke 21 means you're staying in a constant, close relationship with him. Yes, ma'am.
Does in your house have a significance? How do we take that for today for our loved ones? What is in your house and not outside in the street?
Well, first of all, this has to be taken ultra literally, that it was literally her house. Because when they destroyed the whole city, that was the only house they weren't going to touch. Now, how that would apply to us, we just have to wait till God tells us. I don't know. See, we don't know how God's going to do it for us.
And isn't Rahab in Jesus' generational line?
Yes, she is, yeah. Because she married Salmon. And yes, she's in the generation of Jesus. She was a woman of great faith. But this is interesting here. Let's look here at verse, let's see. Look at verse 21. She said, according to your words be it so, and she sent them away, and she put that scarlet thread out there. Now look at chapter 4 and verse 19. Well, before we get to that, what I want to point out is she put that thread out there. And you remember what God said, the walls are going to fall down? You go around the city, and the seventh day, all the walls will fall down. Where did Rahab live? Anybody not know?
On the wall.
She lived on the wall.
Yes.
Man, it took faith. That took a lot of faith. She lived right on the wall that was going to fall down. Now, chapter 4, verse 19. The people came out of Jordan on the 10th day of the first month. Now, that was 4 days ago. And they encamped there in Gilgal. Verse 10 of chapter 5, verse 10. And the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal. They kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at evening, toward evening, meaning in the afternoon of the 14th. Now, that year, the Passover day fell on a Saturday. And the wave sheaf fell the very next day. So the Passover fell on a Saturday, just like it does this year. There's one chance out of 7 that the Passover will fall on a Saturday. So that year, the Passover day fell on a Saturday. The next day was a Sunday, the first day of unleavened bread. I won't go into proving that today. Now, look at chapter 6 of Joshua, verse 2. The Lord said to Joshua, see, I've given you the land of Jericho. So in other words, go get it. Verse 3, you shall compass the city. Do this 6 days. Verse 4, you have 7 trumpets. On the 7th day, you'll compass it 7 times. And then verse 5, the last 3 lines, the wall of the city shall fall down flat. That's not good for Rahab. Verse 14, and the 2nd day, they compassed the city once, and they did that 6 days. And then verse 15, on the 7th day, they rose early in the morning, they compassed, or encompassed, meaning they surrounded the city 7 times. Only on that day, they compassed the city 7 times. And verse 16, Joshua said, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. Now, verse 23, and the young men that were spies went in and brought out Rahab and her father and her mother and her brother and all that she had. So God did spare their life. Verse 25, Joshua saved Rahab the harlot and her alive and her father's household and all that she had. In other words, because Rahab was a woman of faith, her whole family got saved. Now, God is the same today as he was yesterday. Do you know that the lives of your family, your brothers and sisters, parents, children, whatever, could be totally dependent upon you? If you are a Philadelphian Christian, you might be able to save, because God's no respecter of persons. This woman was a Gentile. She wasn't Jewish, she was a Gentile. She wasn't even in covenant with God. But if he did it for Rahab, he'd do it for you. God, and I've never really noticed this before. God can save your family when the tribulation comes. Oh, but my family is a bunch of agnostics. But if you're a Philadelphian Christian, he could save you. Now, I'm going to show you something in the New Testament here.
Did all of Noah's family?
All the ones that believed. Yeah. We don't know how many children he had, but he had 3 sons that believed, and their wives went with him. That's what saved the whole human race. Now, it's true that you can't, let's go to, if you want to turn to it with me, to 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Now, you've heard it said you cannot be saved on the coattails of somebody else. Even Billy Graham's children can't be saved just because their daddy was Billy Graham. You see, I mean, your father could be the greatest preacher in the world, but you can't be saved because you're his child. You yourself have to accept Christ. However, when it comes to the physical deliverance, it's possible that if you are the kind of Christian you should be, that you could get your family protected. 1 Corinthians 7, Paul says in verse 10, to the married I command yet not the Lord. I command I, not the Lord. And then when you say that's his opinion. But verse 40, the last part says, I think I have the Spirit of God, meaning on this matter. And he was directed by the Spirit of God. And John put this in the New Testament. He says, let not the wife depart from her husband, but if she does depart, let her remain unmarried or be reconciled to her husband. Verse 12, but to the rest I speak, not the Lord. If any brother has a wife that believes not, and she be pleased to dwell with him, don't put her away, don't divorce her, and the woman the same with the husband. Verse 14, for the unbelieving husband, so if you're married to an unbelieving husband, is sanctified by the wife. And the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Now, in Latin, sanctified means to be holy, but in the original Greek, it means set apart. Your unbelieving spouse is set apart because you are living for Christ. Now, they're not saved. You can't get your unsaved spouse saved just because you're a Christian. But when it comes to the Great Tribulation, when God protects your household, your unbelieving spouse gets protected too. Look at the rest of it. They're sanctified. Else were your children unclean, but now they're holy before God. So in other words, your children and your unbelieving spouse can be protected because you're a Philadelphian Christian. I'd never preached this before. I'd always said, you better make sure you're a Philadelphian Christian. And people are thinking, dear me, my relatives are, boy, they're in for a mess, aren't they? But it's possible that we could get our relatives spared the tribulation. That is good news. That is encouraging news. Because I've got a brother that is certainly not a Philadelphia Christian. And his son, my heathen nephew, as I call him, I don't know how I'm going to help him. He's up in Alaska. But if they're close enough to you and God says, I want you to go to a special place I've got prepared to you, grab your family and say, come on, let's go. Because they can be protected. Now let's go to Genesis 19. Genesis 19. This is shouting ground, as they say in Pentecostal churches. Dear me, this is exciting. Genesis 18. Let's go there instead. Let's go to Genesis 18. Genesis 18, verse 17. The Lord said to Abraham, shall I hide from Abraham the thing which I'm going to do? Seeing that Abraham will surely be a great nation, and so on. Verse 20, the Lord said, the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I'm going to go down now and see whether they have done altogether to the cry of it, what he heard from the angels. And if not, I'll know. He had two other men with him who were angels, and the men, those angels, turned their faces from there and went toward Sodom. But Abraham was still talking to the Lord. The other two angels went on to Sodom. We read about them in chapter 19. And so Abraham says, are you going to destroy everybody in Sodom? Yeah, if it's as bad as I've heard. Well, what if there's 50 righteous? You know the story. Okay, God said if there's 50, I won't destroy it. But what if there's only 5 lacking? What if there's only 45? Okay, for 45. Well, what if there's only 40? I heard somebody say this was the first Jew job on record. He Jewed him down to 10. I heard a preacher say that. I heard Kenneth Copeland say that. He's the one that said that. Said he Jewed him down from 50 down to 10. I hope that's not a racist statement.
That is not a good statement.
I quoted Kenneth Copeland on that. But anyway, he was at 50, got him down to 10. Now, so those two angels then were instructed, or if you find 10 people, don't destroy the city. So they went down there. Now in chapter 19, verse 1, there came two angels, those were the two men that was with God, to Sodom, and Lot sat in the gate, and so on. Verse 10, the men put forth their hand, pulled Lot into the house because they were wanting to do something bad. Verse 11, those two angels smote the men that were outside the door with blindness. Obviously, these were angels because human men wouldn't do that. Verse 12, the men said, have you here any besides? Now, when they went to Sodom, they didn't find 10 people. They found one. The only one who was righteous was Lot. His wife wasn't righteous. His two daughters, well, they don't get into that. So he only found one man who was righteous. And so notice what they said. There was only one righteous, but notice what they said. They said, verse 12, have you here any besides? Son-in-law, sons, daughters, whatever you have in the city, bring them out of this place. When the Great Tribulation starts, and it's going to cover the whole world, don't think, well, I'll go to Australia, huh? Yeah, well, good luck. I'll move to New Zealand. Now, if God tells you go, go. But don't assume that, well, now, I tell you, there is one place that probably won't affect, and that's Antarctica. Good luck in living 3.5 years in Antarctica. Summers are hard to survive. Winters, you'll die in. So, where are you going to go? You're going to have to go to the rock. Remember that old hymn, I go to the rock of my salvation? I love that old praise course. I go to the rock of my salvation. How's the rest of that go? I have somebody singing here in a minute. I go to the rock of my salvation. I can't remember the rest of it. But anyway, Jesus is the rock. And so they said, you bring these people out and we're going to deliver them. We'll save them. And then verse 13, for we will destroy this place. The cry is great. Verse 14, Lot went out and he spoke to his sons-in-law who had married his daughters. Up, get you out of this place. The Lord will destroy it. But he seemed as one that mocked. They didn't believe him. And then verse 15, Lot said, arise. No, this is what the angel said to Lot. Arise, take your wife and 2 daughters. Can't get the rest of it. Take her 2 daughters, lest they be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And verse 16, he lingered. It's hard to leave your home. He lingered. He just procrastinated. So they laid hold on him. the Lord being merciful to them. They brought him out of the city. Now, verse 17, they said, escape for your life, don't look behind. Don't stay in the plain. Escape to the mountain. Well, Lot's wife, Jesus said in the book of Luke, remember Lot's wife. What is there to remember? Her heart yearned. Her heart was in the world, in that evil city. That's where her heart was. That's where she belonged. But because she was married to a righteous man, guess what? She got delivered. And she could have been totally delivered, except she wanted to go back. Once God delivers you from sin and iniquity and wickedness and the traditions, the pagan, heathen traditions of this world, don't you ever look back. Jesus said, he that puts his hand to the plow and looks back is not fit for the kingdom of God. Who had a question?
I don't know that Lot was there. He lingered. I wonder if he was spared because of Abraham's faith.
Well, it does say, Peter did say that righteous man vexed with the filthy conduct of the wicked. So Peter does call him a righteous man. But, you know, yeah, he could have been a little better. But living in that city could have rubbed off on him a little bit. And so what happened? Lot was protected. Let's go to chapter 30. I'm going to read you one verse out of chapter 30. Your relatives can be blessed because of their association with you. In verse 27 of chapter 30. Laban, who was a relative of Jacob, said to Jacob, I pray thee, if I found favor in thine eyes, tarry, for I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake. God may bless your unconverted loved ones and relatives for your sake. God, I serve you. I love you with all my heart, but my brother doesn't. My sister doesn't. God said, for your sake, I'll save your brother. I'll save your sister. You know, I have a son or daughter who's an agnostic. Well, for your sake, I'll save them too. Yeah.
What about, is it just relatives or friends?
Well, I imagine Rahab probably invited her friends too, and if whoever was Rahab, whoever was with her got protected.
Do they have to live with you?
No, they didn't live with Rahab, but when the crowd, no, they don't have to be in your house. But here's the thing:
The relationship connection.
it's not. Don't get hung up on the house itself. In other words, you may be living in a tent when that happens, but God would say, get them all to be with you. When I send you to the wilderness, if they go with you, they'll be protected. God might put you on a bus or a van, and whoever's with you will be protected.
So they're going to have enough sense to come with you when you tell
Yeah,
them to.
yeah. They're going to have enough faith. And if people know that we're Christians, when you say, look, God has spoken to me, do you want to come or don't you? Well, I know you so well. I know you're a true Christian. If God told you to leave, I'm coming with you. What was your question?
Can't somehow, or I should say most times when you follow the call on your life, sometimes a lot of friends drop off.
Yeah, they do.
So,
But you know,
ordained.
some of our friends who drop off and think we're crazy, and that's going to happen. And they persecute us sometimes. Most of the time just laugh at us, but that's okay. But a lot of times when they get sick or when they get on their deathbed, who do they call? They call this nut over here they thought was crazy. But hey, here this nut can reach God. I think their religion's a little wacky, but hey, they can reach God. And so when you say, hey, God said he's going to destroy this country, he's sending me down here, you better go with me, they might say, maybe I better. You know, if you know for a fact that somebody hears from God and they tell you they've heard from God, y'all will listen. Yes, sir.
I wonder how many people's gonna be following that man tradition that when he walks up in that temple and tells them Jesus Christ.
The vast majority of the world.
That's right. It's gonna be hard to get your loved ones to quit following him.
It could be, yeah. If their name's not written in the book of life, it says that they're going to be deceived by that man. Now, what do we have to make sure? How much time do I have?
Yes, 25 after.
Ooh, okay. What do we have to do to ensure that you and I are right? See, if I'm not right, I can't get my unsaved brother protected, or my nephews, or friends, relatives. I can't do anything for them if I'm not right. Now, I'm going to give you 7 things real quickly that you need to do to make sure you are right. Because if you're not right, your relatives, they're going to go down the drain with you. All right? Number 1, I'll make these fast, but number 1, hunger and thirst after righteousness. Don't take it or leave it. That's Matthew 5, verse 6. If you hunger, if you thirst for it, you'll be filled. Well, I don't know. I'll read my Bible. I read it a month ago. I wonder where my Bible is. It's right here somewhere. Hey, you're not hungering and thirsting. Hunger and thirst for it. I want the truth of God, no matter what it is. Number 2, study to show yourself approved. Well, I'm already approved, aren't I? That's 2 Timothy 2:15. Paul said, after I've preached to others, I myself could be a castaway. And a lot of the new versions say that means disapproved. Is it possible that you could be a Christian and then be found disapproved because you haven't been studying? Is it a quick question?
Well, it's somebody reiterating what's been said in the room. Stop worrying about what time it is.
Okay, good, okay. Stop worrying about what time it is. I'm glad you're getting something out of this message because look, your lives and the loved ones that you have could depend on what you do with this message today. That's why you ought to be in church. Every time we have the doors open, man, you ought to be. You never know what God's going to give me from one week to the next. I'm giving you stuff that I think God has given me. I go to my knees before the King of Heaven every week and I say, God, what do the people need? You know what they need. I don't. And I ask God to give me the message. So be with us every week because you don't know what God's going to give me from one week to the next. In 1 week, we may be announcing that red heifer and the building of the temple, and you won't be here to hear it if you're not watching. And if they don't put it on the news, you'll miss it. Number 3, do what the Philadelphians are to do. Don't deny his name and keep his word. Make sure you're doing that. That's Revelation 3, verses 8 through 10. Don't deny his name. Don't deny his authority, his lordship. And then number 4 goes right along with it. Luke 21:36. Watch and pray always. Luke 21:36. The word watch in Greek doesn't mean watch TV. It means be awake, stay alert. What am I to stay alert to? I'm not staying alert to you. I'm not judging you. I'm staying alert to me. I'm watching me. I'm praying for you, but I'm watching me. I'm not judging you. I'm praying for you. I'm judging me. 1 Corinthians 11, if we judge ourselves, then we don't have to be judged. I'm going to judge myself. How am I doing? I look in the spiritual mirror and I say, how am I doing? I don't think I'm doing so well. So I want to make sure that I'm ready. Yes, ma'am.
What's the verse for
Number 3 was don't deny his name, keep his word. That's Revelation 3, verses 8 through 10, about the Philadelphians. And the companion scripture is Luke 21:36, watch and pray. Number 5, grow in knowledge. 2 Peter 3:18. Well, I got a college degree. I know everything there is to know. Well, I wish you'd share it with me because I don't. I'm still growing in knowledge. I told our first year class, I said, come back in 5 years. Who knows what all God will show me in 5 years that I don't know now. And none of those people came back. So I'm telling you all to say, first of all, don't come back in 5 years. Stay with us. Because God is showing me things as we get closer to the time of the end. Knowledge shall be increased. Grow in knowledge. Now, you can do what you want to with this message, but your life could depend on it. And the lives of your loved ones could depend on it. Number 6. Our heart must be in the end time work of God. It's been said, and I'm not the one who said it, but it's been said by others, that the people who grow spiritually the most, the people who grow the fastest spiritually, are those who have their heart in God's work. What is God's work? John 6 says the work of God is getting people to believe on Jesus. The work of the gospel and preaching the truth of God, which so many churches preach traditions, like tomorrow with their bunnies and their eggs. That's traditions. But keep your heart in the work of God and in the truth of God. And if your heart's in it, then you're going to grow spiritually. How do you know if your heart's in the work? You say, well, I think it is. Well, I'm going to tell you the barometer, how you will know if your heart is really in his work. Jesus said, where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be. I know where your heart is by where you put your money. I go in your house and here's baseball stuff, and you've got thousands of dollars worth of baseball stuff on the wall and all this stuff. I know you're a baseball fan, or you're a football fanatic, or you're a basketball fanatic, or whatever it might be. Come into my house sometime. I have an entire shelf, all these shelves, an entire bookcase of nothing but Bibles. I'm serious. I didn't buy them. A lot of them were given to me, but I got Bibles of all sorts. But you don't find any baseball paraphernalia. Not that that's wrong, but where's your heart? My heart's in God's work. My heart is in God's word, because when the tribulation comes, I'm the biggest coward in this room. I don't want to go through the tribulation. What about you? I don't like going to the dentist. I sure don't want to go through 3.5 years of this mess, yes.
I'm the biggest coward, not you.
Okay. So for those of us who are cowards like me, get right with God, because think of that hymn, I need thee every hour. I told God that this week. I need you. I need you every hour. Maybe a lot of people don't, but brother, I sure do. And I'm not saying that to try to sound humble. I'm serious. I need God's help. I don't get in that car except I pray, Lord, protect me. I pray for all of you. Like this morning on the way over here, I said, Lord, protect all of us who are coming to church. Because we need that help. So number 6 is get your heart in the work of God. Matthew 6:21, where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be. So support the ministry with your financial support and your prayers every day. I've done this for many, many years. I pray. I never let a day go by that I don't pray to God that He will bless His work and His church around the world. I don't know who all God's using. I don't know where all God is working, but God knows who He's working with. And God, bless your work wherever it's being done around the world. And then I say, and bless our ministry too. Bless our work too. Pray for God's work. I pray for His work. I pray for His church every day, and I've done it for years and years. And then finally, and by the way, a part of having your heart in the work of God is come to our church service every week, because you will grow spiritually as you come every week. Number 7, and I'll conclude with this, and this is sort of a capstone on the rest of this. Whatever you do, don't quit. What do you mean quit? People, I've seen it. You know why we don't have a couple of hundred people meeting with us? We've had hundreds of people to go through our college. Where are they? They went to the college, they got their degree, and they fell away. And they'll be celebrating Easter tomorrow.
Part of not quitting and keeping your heart in the ministry and in God's true work is coming to church and being surrounded by like-minded believers.
Yeah.
Because so many of us, when we come into the truth of God, are ridiculed by our family, shunned by our friends, and when you're not have that support of like-minded believers,
Yeah.
it's hard. It's real easy to fall back into the world when you're being pressured by your family, but you're not being surrounded by those like-minded believers that you can get support from and know where you've been and what you're going through, and it can help you. It's hard when like my mom, I've been studying with him for 17 years, and my mama still rolls her eyes at me.
No, family.
In 17 years. And my brother, he thought I was brainwashed and couldn't stand him because he thought he brainwashed me. So
Yeah, she got brainwashed. According to Psalm 119, verse 9, how should you cleanse your way? How do you get washed? By taking heed to God's word. This is how you get washed.
Before I started here, I mentioned to a friend that I was thinking about, going to Bible college. And first thing she said, she's like, I hope you don't change.
Don't change. Don't improve. Stay the way you are. So that 7th thing is, once you get started, once you put your hand to the plow, I'm going to keep God's 10 commandments, all 10 of them. Yes, even the 4th one. Once you start, don't quit. And one final thought I just thought of, and then we're going to conclude. 2 Peter 2, and I think it's verses 20 and 21, I think. But it says, it's better not to have known the way of truth and the way of righteousness than to know it and turn from it. It's better to lived and died in ignorance than to know the truth and then not do it. Do we have any questions? Was this helpful? Yes, sir.
Well, another thing, Pastor, I know this ain't, pertaining to what you said about the 7 things, but the Bible says turn away from such fantasies such as Christmas and Easter and
Yeah.
you going to heaven when the Great Tribulation comes, worshiping on Sunday,
I believe in the birth of Jesus, but he was born in September, and I believe in the resurrection of Christ, but it wasn't on Easter. And Halloween, what's that about? You have a question?
Yeah, you consider knowledge, what we mentioned a minute ago, and wisdom as being the same?
No, knowledge is knowing facts. Wisdom is to know how to use them, how to use those facts properly. And the Bible says, with all you're getting, says get knowledge, but with all you're getting, get understanding and get wisdom. Any other questions? I hope this was helpful to you.
I have a comment.
Okay.
Just in reference to number 7, when you say don't quit. I look at it as saying, totally surrendering to God. So
Yeah.
that we're not drawn away by the lusts and desires of our own selves.
Yeah.
Then that's the way you keep it up.
Yeah, don't be drawn away. The Bible talks about those who fall away are drawn away by their own lusts. That's in the book of James. Well, I know I've held you for a long time.
You're gonna pay for it too.
I'm gonna pay for
It's
it.
just 5 minutes extra.
Is it just 5 minutes extra? It's so good to see all of you again. I want to thank Dr. Souls for bringing the amplifier. That was a real blessing, and the microphone. And thank Dr. Everhart again for using the live stream. And for all of you who came out today, it's good to see all of you. And tomorrow morning, we'll be meeting at the Events Center. Please be here with us because I want to explain the real meaning.
Be there with us.
Be there with us. What I say?
Here.
Don't be here. Be there with us.
If y'all come here, y'all be meeting with the Baptists.
Yeah, be here. Be there with us at. We'll start at 10:30 sharp. So be there about a quarter after. How many of you plan on being there tomorrow? I want to know. Nobody? A few people? Okay, all of you. Good. Good. All right.
Lake
So.
Event Center. Did you see? I seen the email. I sent the address. 10:30.
For those of you who are on the internet,
We have the building from 10 to 12, so if you get there between 10 and 10:30.
we will be doing this again tomorrow. So for those of you over the internet, be watching for us at 10:30. And we're all dismissed. God bless you all. It's so
Oh,
good
there
to
is
see
a
you.
question.
Okay, we'll take one more question.
How should Sabbath keepers respond to Sunday goers?
Love them.
Love them.
Love them and love them into the truth. And if God's not opening up their mind, they can't see it, but plant a seed.
I don't argue with my mom.
No, don't argue with anybody. You know, if a person asks me a question, I'll answer, but they say, well, I believe it this way. That's nice, have a nice day. I don't argue with the scriptures. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say, you lose a lot of friends along the way, you know, when you accept Jesus and you come to your faith.
Yeah.
But you know what? When people are in trouble, they call you.
They do.
And
They'll
they
call you.
ask for your advice, and that's happened to my husband a lot of times.
Mhm.
People, when they're in trouble, they call him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Unbelievers, people that aren't living their life.
They may think you're nuts, but when they get in
But
trouble,
when they get in trouble, they call you.
yeah.
for help.
And when the tribulation comes and they're still here and they're saying, why are we still here? They may call you on the phone and say, have you heard anything from God? Yeah, I'm leaving. You want to come along? God bless you all. We'll see you all tomorrow. If you have any questions, you can get the address from us.